Good morning from wherever you're calling in and from wherever you are. I'm Athar Hussain Khan. I'm the Secretary General of the European Business Aviation Association, EBAA. And I would like to warmly welcome you to this webinar on getting ready for the end of the Brexit transition period. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank the UK CAA and particularly David Kendrick and his team for the great collaboration and the working relationship we've built over the past 3 years. All their efforts to support the business aviation community during the period of uncertainty we're all facing are very much appreciated. And I speak on behalf of the entire EBAA membership in conveying that appreciation. I'd also like to thank all the EBAA members who are joining this webinar today. Thank you for your time, but mostly thank you for your resilience. The resilience you demonstrated since the beginning of the pandemic, and the resilience I'm sure you'll demonstrate dealing with the end of the Brexit transition period. My key message to all of you today is, please make sure you're ready to operate as of the 1st of January 2021. Which is less than 1 month away. Please let's not add another crisis to the COVID-19 crisis we're already currently facing. Now, our role at EBAA is to support all our members, whether they're in favor of Brexit or not. Key is to focus on solutions. The presentations and exchanges we'll be having today aim at providing you with the necessary information and practical details so you're able to operate to or from the UK in 2021 and after that. Now, before giving the floor to David Kendrick for a short presentation and a Q&A session with all of you, my colleague David Grivet, in charge of European Affairs at EBAA, will provide you with additional guidance on how to interact and ask your questions during this webinar. Please don't be shy. Please don't hold back. This is your chance to ask your questions and engage in the discussion. I wish you all a very fruitful session and thank you all very much. David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Athar. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Brexit session with the UK CAA. Just before I give the floor to David Kendrick from the Civil Aviation Authority, I would like to let you know and remind you about a few guidelines and a few guidelines just to make sure we can get your questions in the right way during the Q&A part of this webinar. So first of all, you will be automatically muted, all of you. If there is really a burning question that you cannot ask through the Q&A feature of the webinar, that is at the bottom or at the top of your screen, you can still raise your hands and we will give you the floor. Questions from the audience will be submitted in writing using the specific Q&A tool as I just mentioned. Open it, ask your questions, and as just mentioned by Athar, please don't be shy. It's really an opportunity for you to ask your questions directly to the UK CAA, and time is running, so it's now or never, let's say. If we are unable to get your questions at the end of the webinar because we don't have time and there's so many questions that we can't reply to all of them, you will be able to send questions by email to me, and then I will liaise with the British authorities to make sure that we find an answer for you. Also, for your information, this meeting will be recorded through video and audio. So, without further ado, I'm not sure it's still needed to introduce David Kendrick, but if you don't know him, he's the head of Airline Licensing, Consumer and Market Group at the UK Civil Aviation Authority. So over to you, David. Thank you again. Thank you very much for your participation.
That's very kind, David and Atta. Thank you for the extremely warm welcome. And indeed, good morning to everybody. As Atta alluded to, today is your day to ask me questions. I may not know all the answers, but we will seek to try to give you an answer to the questions that are actually posed. And as David said, if we can't actually answer something now, maybe that we can't, then we will take it away through David, and we will seek to come back with a question or an answer to the question sort of in due course. So I don't think you probably need any more questions than you already actually have. So could we have the first slide, please? I thought the best way to start would be give a sort of outline of quite where we are and how we within the CAA anticipate the next few weeks to unfold. So many of you are keen advocates of the media and have been watching what has happened over the course of the last few months in respect of negotiations. So in that regard, the UK has now left the EU. We left the EU formally on the 31st of January this year. And for us, Brexit has already actually happened in that regard. We are now actually in a process of transition, and that process of transition continues until the 31st of December. I'll come back to that in a few moments. For those that are keen at studies and students of the process of leaving the EU, and I wasn't, but I have now become almost a junior expert into quite what that process might actually look like. The actual process itself allows for the transition period. That transition period generally lasts up to 2 years. The UK government has decided not to take the full period of time that it could. The way it works is the fact there's an extension period that has to be asked for. The UK government decided not to ask for that extension period. That's a matter for it. The reason that we're actually departing on the 31st of December is the fact that certain elements of time were taken in the actual discussion of the actual withdrawal agreement itself. So we don't actually have a full year on this occasion, we actually have roughly 11 months. So that future trade agreement, those negotiations are ongoing. I and my colleagues within government have participated in certain aspects of those negotiations. I think it's probably quite helpful just to touch on what they actually look like and how they actually impact aviation itself. So aviation is only one chapter of the entire agreement as a whole. So you may have heard the phrase of it's all or nothing. Essentially, it has to be a complete agreement, and we have to cover some very contentious issues in addition to aviation. In many ways, aviation, because of the nature of the activities we have always had, has always been very international. And I think both sides, both the EU side and the UK side, actually had a lot of clarity right from the beginning as to what they might actually be looking for. There are complexities within that, some of which I can touch upon, some of which I'm afraid that I can't, as the negotiations are ongoing. One of the difficulties, of course, here is because it's a complete one agreement, then we actually have to ensure that other areas, as described within the agreement itself, or the structure of the negotiations, as other tables covering fish, state aid, and indeed dispute resolution, have to be resolved before the agreement can actually be signed. And as I'm certain you've seen from the media, we are starting to come towards the end of that period where there's actually time to complete the actual negotiations itself and ratification. I'm firmly of the view that if an agreement can be reached, then I'm fairly sure that even though that there is still an opportunity, sorry, I'll try again. So I'm of the view that if an agreement can be reached, even though technically the period of time still needs to be allowed for ratification, it is in both sides' interest to find a solution to that taking place, provided, of course, it happens as quickly as it possibly can. From our perspective, what we are looking to actually achieve here is stability for passengers as an industry. What we're actually looking for is as much clarity as we can possibly get in that regard, and as I said, I'll come to that later in the presentation. So what we're actually looking at is a situation, and probably the most of interest here, which is what market access might look like going forward. So in that regard, we are looking at a position of traffic rights. Currently, we are looking at third and fourth freedom traffic rights, so essentially flights between the UK and the EU, going backwards and forwards. That's what we are currently discussing at the moment, and has actually been published in both sides' negotiating mandates that they are looking for unlimited third and fourth freedom flights. Part of that, of course, works in the process of reciprocity, in the fact that what is offered to EU carriers should also be reflected in what is offered to UK carriers. So Her Majesty's Government's policy in this regard is the fact that whilst there might be slight adjustments around the edge, as far as possible, the arrangements on both sides in relation to aviation should be as symmetrical as possible and as reciprocal as possible, although there may have to be exceptions in that, just to reflect the fact that both sides have been partners for such a long time. And I think that's the key element here. UK is not actually leaving Europe, we're leaving the EU. There's a fundamental difference. We are still going to be a major element of activity within the European aviation space. It may be that we would do it slightly differently than before, but the UK approach has always been one of collaboration, and that is what we intend to carry on in terms of our policy. In terms of the actual traffic rights that are actually going to be available, as I said, what we're looking at this moment is third and fourth freedom, and that's flights between the UK and the EU. And when I say the EU, it's slightly broader than that, in that whilst we're negotiating with the EU directly, there have been other conversations that you'd expect to take place in relation to other parts of the European Common Aviation Area. So I'm thinking of Switzerland and of course the EEA areas. So what we're anticipating is the fact that there will be an arrangement, might be done in slightly different ways, that will allow for those third and fourth freedom rights to occur between the UK and the EU directly. Whilst we have a structure in place that we hope will actually manage that element, there will be certain things that won't be on offer on either side going forward, and that includes domestic operations or cabotage. And we have put in place a number of structures that we hope will deal with the ad hoc charter elements of this. So let's move on to that. So next slide, please. I have a feeling that some of the slides we have here are not necessarily quite in the same order, but never mind. Let's proceed on the basis of what we actually have. So part of what is keen to us is the fact that we want to ensure that operators are actually prepared, and we've put a significant amount of effort in actually looking at what the needs of operators are likely to be sort of going forward. In that regard, we are conscious, of course, of the fact that there will be a need for, particularly for ad hoc charter operations, to have a structure in place that deal particularly with the air taxi elements of that structure. We are, in that regard, bringing into existence something we call the block permit scheme. So a block permit scheme is essentially a process whereby the CAA will grant, for a 3-month period in the first instance, approval, subject to qualifying criteria, for an air taxi operator, EU air taxi operator, to undertake third and fourth freedom flights, so that they can actually continue to undertake the just-in-time charters that they have been operating to date. Now, we have modeled that scheme on what others have done elsewhere in the EU. It is not necessarily a unique scheme to the UK. I think we'd like to add significant value to its structure. But as I said, what we tried to do there is we tried to build on what others have done so that there's some commonality in terms of approach. But the idea behind it is the fact that we will give a permit to an air taxi operator, and that would include air ambulance operations, we class them in the same, that would allow third and fourth freedom flights to continue, because we've already pre-qualified for those operations. So you will not need an individual permit in order to undertake the services that we anticipate, or that you need to anticipate. And that will allow you to continue in many ways to operate as you have done before, if you are an EU carrier. The difficulty, of course, is that we have to bear in mind here that there is a competitive angle to all of this. And we are, as you'd expect from the UK Civil Aviation Authority, here to support primarily UK operators. So in offering the block permit scheme, there is negotiations that we are undertaking with our counterparts in other member states to encourage them to do exactly the same for the UK operators. So a UK operator will be given, the aim is that by setting the example, and indeed building on schemes that already exist where there are block permit schemes elsewhere in other EU states, we are trying to put in place a structure that will allow the same approach in terms of just-in-time charters for third and fourth regions for EU operation, for UK operators going into the EU. Now, I'm pleased to say that many of the conversations we've actually had at this stage have been very encouraging. Our counterparts in other CAAs have indicated that they'd be prepared to consider a scheme of this nature. It may be that we can't do this on day one, because elements of it will need changes in law in order to actually bring across. But we have started that process, and of course, in order to actually take it through, if we are not able to reach a process of reciprocity, then we would have to consider at the UK end that we might have to withdraw that scheme for those countries or EU member states that are not allowing the same sort of structure. So, for example, carriers of one EU state that currently is benefiting from a block permit scheme may not be able to benefit from that sort of after the 3-month period, or unless we have indications from that member state that they will be thinking of something similar for UK operators. Now, one of the key elements to coming into the UK is the adoption by us of what we call the third country operator scheme. Now, you'll be aware that in order to fly into Europe now, rest of the world carriers currently have to apply to EASA for that permission. Now, obviously, as part of the UK leaving the EU, we're no longer part of the EASA framework, and that means for us that we actually have to put in place our own TCO scheme equivalent. And because EU carriers are becoming to the UK third country operators, we have had to put in place a structure whereby they will need as a qualifying requirement to have a TCO, just as UK carriers are required to have from EASA TCOs because they become third country operators to the EU. I'm pleased to say that that the UK has moved very quickly in this regard, and that whilst there are a number of applications pending, we've issued some 330 TCOs, and that largely, as far as the UK is concerned, that process for us is complete. There will obviously need to be work ongoing, but we are almost there. I'm going to stop at that particular point because I think we're probably reaching the stage where it would be useful to actually start to take some questions. I only wanted to provide a brief overview, and I think that that probably sets the scene at this stage. So, David.
Thank you very much, David, for this comprehensive presentation. I see that we already have 2 questions, which is great, but we can have much more questions. So please, to the participants who didn't submit their questions yet, please do so. We still have a bit of time before David Kendrick answers those questions, because I'm pleased to let you know that we are also joined today by Eve O'Sullivan, who is the chair lady of the BBGA, British Business and General Aviation Association, and she might have a few interesting tricks also, or comments to make on the Brexit and on what David just mentioned in his presentation. So please, Eve, over to you.
Morning. Thank you, David, and thank you to EBAA for inviting BBGA along to this webinar. I think it's an important webinar to have. And certainly our position today is here to support, both to support the CAA, but also all of the members, the BBGA members, and indeed the EBAA members. I think it's probably very important at this point that we highlight aviation in particular is something that is, to some degree, needs to be apolitical. And regardless of the deal or no deal, or indeed the negotiations that are ongoing, we do need to find a path for continuity of security, of operations, etc., across Europe and within the UK. And you know, David mentioned reciprocity. That's obviously a key issue for our UK operators. We need to be able to continue on and operate in Europe as best we can, given what we're all facing, in the same way that the European operators need to be able to come in and out of the UK and continue their operations. So I think it's very important just to highlight that we have a very healthy relationship with the EBAA. We're building on it, and it has been a fantastic relationship in the past, and we plan to continue to do that, as I say, regardless of what happens with the Brexit negotiations. I think it's fair to say we would all be very relieved if a deal were agreed. And as I say, you know, aviation stands a little apart in that it's not something that can really be dealt with at the 11th hour. So we've been working very closely with the CAA, with the Department for Transport here in the UK, and with the upper echelons of government across all fields, just to try and ensure that we can protect the business and the continuity in business aviation going forward. It's very, very important. I would like to thank EBAA for arranging this webinar. I think it's very, very important for the UK to hear the European side of it. You know, we do tend to be slightly obsessed with Brexit because we have to be. It's a massive change to the UK. And obviously it's a worrisome time because there are a lot of things that need to be dealt with, but it's also a time of great opportunity, and it's a great opportunity for the UK to reposition itself and to deal with some of the things that, you know, we've struggled with previously in terms of business aviation. And I'm very pleased to say that the government and indeed the DFT and the CAA are listening very closely to us, and we will continue on to do that. So it's as much as it's important for the Europeans to see what the UK is doing, it's very much important for us to hear you and to ensure that we address what is a very healthy industry, and to make sure that we can continue to ensure that, you know, as much as we can protect the businesses of all going forward. Some of the things we are looking at here in the UK is what happens post-Brexit. You know, it's happening, it's happened to some degree, and now it's a case of looking forward and you know, just in a sense of rebuilding. And this relationship, this European relationship, is obviously one of the key relationships for Britain, but as is, you know, the ongoing, as David mentioned, the rest of the world relationship. So pleased to say that the UK has been very busy and very active in negotiating the kind of international treaties that we need to continue to support aviation. But that's essentially it. I mean, I'm here today just to continue to offer support, to continue to keep the dialogue going. It is incredibly important, as I say, that we do that, because the EASA, and, you know, personal opinion is, EASA was one of the things that Europe did extremely well, and you know, the UK was a fundamental part of building the EASA and all of the aspects of it. So it would make no sense whatsoever for us not to continue to have dialogue and you know, do what we can in terms of the opportunities going forward, and making sure that everybody can avail of it, with some protection for the competitive element on both sides.
Thank you very much, Eve. And we would totally agree with you at EBAA, because ultimately what we all want to do, whether we are based or not in the UK or in continental Europe, is to keep flying. That's a priority right now. it's true that the debate on Brexit was very emotional over the past few years, very political as well. But I think that now is the time really to focus on the practical details on the operation and how we can make sure that British operators, UK operators, and continental operators can fly as of the 1st of January 2021. Thank you very much, Yves. So now I see that we received already a few questions on the Q&A feature of the webinar. We have already 6 questions, so I will take them not anymore by chronological order, because I see that you can like the questions, and there's a question with 3 likes so far. That's the question from Paul Kramer at Gamma Aviation, who writes, and now it's, yeah. So it's still Paul. On behalf of UK operators, please could you kindly provide an update on progress being made with the EU member states regarding reciprocal agreements for block permit schemes? Thank you. So it's a question about reciprocity, David. Can you take it?
Fair enough,
Please?
I can take it. So there's one element here. I think from the UK's perspective, we have an acronym that we use for ourselves, which is Clarity, Confidence and Stability, CCS. What we're actually looking to ensure that industry as a whole has the confidence that they can continue to operate. And in that, we believe that the block permit scheme adds a significant amount of value on both sides. So in that regard, we have had bilateral conversations with nearly all EU member states, not everybody. And we have actually showcased the block permit scheme. For some, as I said, it was a relatively easy conversation because they already have a scheme of that nature in place. For others, I think that they are having to come to terms with the fact that they might actually have to have a permit scheme in place almost for the first time, because the majority of flights that they've received have been either predominantly from the EU, so they've never needed to have a third country operator scheme, or at least not for a significant period of time. So the conversations we've had have actually been I think generally warmly received. I can't say the country's concerned, forgive me, the reason because this is still an ongoing discussion. And of course, in many ways, it depends on what the outcome of the negotiations actually come up with. It may be that the negotiations actually address elements of this. I suspect that they probably won't, and that there will still be the need for permits on the other side. But the structure itself of these conversations is warm and encouraging. And I'm probably going to stop there because I'm not certain I can add any value in actually saying that people have positively said that they are going to do it, unless they already have such a scheme, but they have indicated an interest in how it might actually work. And as I said, in many ways, the UK has added value, I think, within the EU by actually setting an example of how we might practically do things. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, David. I see there are other questions on reciprocity anyway, so we'll probably address other questions of this kind. The next questions is from Flying Group, Leven from Flying Group, who wants some information about the procedure to obtain permission to operate ad-hoc charter flights in and out of Channel Islands, Isle of Man and Gibraltar. So I don't know if you have the answer to this question, David.
I have the answer to these questions. The only thing I say is that the British always do things in a complicated way. So even though we're only a small country, we've managed to actually divide ourselves up into a number of areas. So many of you will be familiar with the fact that we have a devolved arrangement in respect of Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England itself. So the way we've actually structured ourselves is to have separate regional governments that deal with a large number of these factors. Aviation is not a devolved matter. To add to another layer of complexity is we have a series of what we call crown dependencies, and all of those three, Channel Islands, Isle of Man and Gibraltar, are crown dependencies, and they are self-governing. That means that they have their own structure in place to manage permits. So if you wish to go to the Channel Islands, Isle of Man or Gibraltar from any point in the ECAA directly, and you will need to apply to the authorities of those particular jurisdictions.
Thank you very much, David. I hope it will answer the question of Lieven from Flying Group. Next question I see on my screen is the question from Christophe Mittal. That is again about very much about reciprocity. The last letter from the UK CAA about the block permit was only mentioning the flights from and to the UK. Will the continental operators be allowed to operate commercial flights within the UK or not? No, it's not about reciprocity. It's about cabotage. Is that correct? So please, David.
I think if you actually look at that letter, it very clearly says that cabotage is something that is not likely to be available. I'm not saying that it won't be available, because as I said, it's still subject to the negotiations. However, it is very unlikely to be available. What does that mean? Now, there are exceptions to how we're actually viewing cabotage. Air taxi operators in general can apply for it, and it will be considered on its merits. Generally, however, the principle is that it won't be granted. Air ambulance operations we put in a slightly different category. So it is very likely there, because obviously we are looking obviously at a humanitarian flight, that we would consider a cabotage flight if it had an air ambulance element to it. As I said, each case will be treated in its respective merits.
Thank you very much, David. The next question on my list, and it's quite a long question, so I will read it. It's from Alan Ruddock from Air Charter Scotland. As an operator, we have now approached several NAAs to seek guidance on their process in the event of a no-deal scenario at the end of the transition period. One question that has come up is whether the UK will withdraw the multilateral agreement on commercial rights of non-scheduled air services in Europe, of which we were a founding member in 1956, and long before we joined the EU. This international body has 44 member countries, including all EU states, but also includes Switzerland, Norway, Turkey, Azerbaijan, to name but a few. As you are no doubt aware of, all our commercial operations are non-scheduled. This would therefore eliminate the need for us to obtain permits in the no-deal scenario. Some national authorities have assumed we will remain a party to this treaty and therefore don't expect to receive permit applications from us, whilst others expect the opposite. So that's very much about this 56 agreement that was already mentioned in several studies, including our study that we released 2 years ago on Brexit. What's your reaction to that, David?
So I think there are two elements here, and indeed Alan and I have already corresponded on this separately. So the UK is not withdrawing from the 1956 Paris Multilateral. In fact, actually, as was touched on earlier, we were a founding member of that agreement. We were a great supporter of it at the time. I wasn't there, but I'm fairly confident that my predecessors in a role or a very similar role would have seen the merits of such an arrangement. But what the 56 agreement, and not all EU states are members of it, I hasten to add they're not signatories, though the overwhelming majority are, is it says that you will have a light touch to administratively to operators that are undertaking air taxi work. And that's very logical. I think it reflected at the time, the point that I made earlier, that this market is quite fragile. It relies very much on just-in-time charters. And essentially, if you don't actually travel when people wanted to travel, usually that work is lost rather than actually just be transferred to another mode of transport or indeed deferred to another day. Have I answered the question?
Thank you, David. There are some construction works in my street, so I hope you don't hear too much noise, but it's the joy of working from home, so I apologize about it. The next question is from Graham Williamson. If the block permits are only for third and fourth freedoms, can you still do fifth or sixth freedom flights, individual permits, and will the process change? A very practical question.
It's like everything. The UK is still open for business. You can apply I mean, it's the same now. I mean, as Graham is aware, if you want to do flights beyond the boundaries of the European Common Aviation Area from the UK, you have to have a foreign carrier permit. A block permit is really just a version of that foreign carrier permit. And the foreign carrier permit essentially says that we are content with the safety, security, insurance aspects of the route and the operator. Now, as I said, the UK is still open for business, or remains open for business, and you may apply for those permissions, and they will be considered on their own merits. I think there is another aspect to this. I go back to the reciprocity approach. If it became apparent that an operator's home state, so in your case, Graham, I believe you're Irish, we're not providing similar rights on a fair and equitable basis to UK carriers, then obviously, in consultation with our government, we'd have to see whether or not we would be prepared to do the same. But the UK's policy has always been one of reciprocity for all of the rest of the world carriers. And in many ways, the EU has become the rest of the world to us, despite the fact, obviously, we have a close relationship and a long-standing, I hope, friendship that will actually get us through to the other side of this.
Thank you very much, David. So let's say that we hope that reciprocity, the principle of reciprocity, will be applied. Next question from Andy West from Sozo Aviation. So his question is, as a part NCC operator registered in the UK, do the CAA expect similar restrictions that UK AOC holders will be required to follow? For example, permits in the event of an ODL. Okay, so non-complex commercial is interesting. So if you're registered in the UK, do we expect the same restrictions to be applied? We are not anticipating change. I think this is an area that we would like to have a more open conversation with our counterparts in EASA to see what this actually might look like. I think part of the difficulty we have at this stage is we've not been able to have a full conversation in this particular sort of arena. It's not the only arena that we've not been able to do so, but it's high on our agenda of things that we actually need to want and need to resolve. Thank you, David. So I'm quite happy because right now you have all the answers. Or you find a way.
I wish.
So next question from Mark Byrne. Have the CAA or the UK's Treasury undertaken a cost-benefit analysis on what Brexit will bring to the UK's aviation industry in general and to business aviation in particular? And given an analysis, was it undertaken? What was concluded?
Okay, this is where I might not have the answer to that question. Okay. Whether or not the Treasury has done such an analysis, I do not know. I would like to hope that they have. I think one of the things that we've actually been very keen and clear in our conversations with government in general, rather than Treasury in particular, is the value that UK aviation and indeed aviation internationally provides, not just in relation to the carriers themselves, but obviously in respect of the fixed-based operations, the maintenance facilities that are in the UK, the pilots, the licensing, the list goes on. So yes, I would like to believe that that work has been done. Have I seen a copy of such analysis? I have not. The CAA has not done the work itself, but then we are your advocates anyway. We know the value that UK aviation and aviation generally provides to the UK economy. We didn't need persuading in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So no answers for this one. Question from Stephen Kelly. These negotiations are all about trust. If the negotiations break down and there is no deal, does that mean that there will be no flights between UK and EU from the 1st of January to 2021?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, negotiations are about trust. I mean, but then again, trust, I think, across the board between the UK and the EU has never really been in doubt. There is an element of trust there. There has to be. I mean, I think in some ways that this is what's made it slightly more difficult. It's like all divorces. There is an element of divorce in it. You want to remain good neighbours. You want to remain good friends. So I can't say whether or not the outcome of the negotiation will be. I hope they do not break down. There is always that possibility. But even without a deal, I think both sides will put in place a process of contingency arrangements. I would step back to the fact that the EU and the UK, even when we didn't think we were going to have a withdrawal agreement, which obviously we managed to put in place back in January, had a structure that would allow for the continuity of flights between our respective blocks. And if we end up with a scenario where negotiations break down, I think it's reasonable to presume that both sides will try to find a solution, at least in this area, to allow continuity. I don't see that changing, but it is not in either side's interest to do so, particularly in the current economic climate.
Thank you, David. So that's somehow quite reassuring that we will still be able to fly whatever the outcome of the negotiation process is. So an anonymous question now, would you be able to share any information available on the issue of having G-registered aircraft being operated by other EU operators? Will there be a possibility for an 83 bis agreement in place to cover that possibility? Thank you.
What I would suggest you do, anonymous attendee, is if you'd like to contact us directly, I'm not seeking to evade the question, we can probably go into it a little bit more detail than actually here. So Article 83, mainly because we won't have time to go into the intricacies of licensing that an 83 bis agreement would actually provide. We are exploring whether or not we actually need 83 bis agreements with EU states. Our view at the moment is that we probably don't, because the Annex 6 structure that already exists within the EASA framework is largely being replicated into the UK domestic law. Let's just step back there. Something that was missing from my slide, which is why I looked slightly puzzled earlier, and it's my fault because I think I missed one or two things in sending it to you earlier, David. We might be leaving EASA, that's true, but much of the framework that we actually have is based on contributions that the UK has made to EASA and things that we've received from EASA. So the structure that we have for how we manage UK aviation, the legislative structure, is something that both sides would be familiar with. Yes, there are changes, because there have to be changes. It would be somewhat foolish for a UK operator to write to the Commission, seeing as the Commission will no longer have any jurisdiction in the UK. But those are sort of legislative changes. So the EU legislation has been carried across into UK law. And as part of that, we have actually looked at how we would actually manage leasing and a whole series of things that sit around it. Now, if you'd like to contact us directly, we will happily talk through how we envisage leasing to actually work on both sides, and that will in some ways of course depend on the negotiations at level.
Thank you, David. So that's quite reassuring as well, even if EASA, even if the UK leaves EASA, you mean that the acquis will still be applicable in the UK? That's what you mean?
Indeed. So basically, as I said, this is my fault for not actually highlighting it earlier. I think in that respect, there was a slide that I should have sent you that I didn't. So as I said, remiss of me. In that regard, we are leaving EASA. We will still have a close working relationship with EASA in one way, shape or form. I think both sides will probably need to see what next year it becomes, brings to us. But the actual legislation, the actual structure of what we're actually doing and how we're seeking to achieve it won't be different, at least not at this stage. It may be in due course that there will be changes in the way that either side do things. That obviously we will actually have to see what the future foretells. And it may be, of course, that the UK can put forward examples and their ways of doing things in a flexible manner, which I think we are well renowned for, that the EASA might adopt itself. So, I mean, as Aoife said earlier, there are opportunities from the UK actually leaving the EU. I appreciate sometimes it might be difficult to actually establish the sort of what the shake-up actually might look like. But one of the things that could come from it is the fact there would be a much more a different approach to how you might do certain things that would encourage a stronger and more robust conversation within EASA and member states, and actually I think add value to our reflective relationships going forward.
Thank you very much, David, for answering this question. The next question I see on my screen is from Michael. When talking about third and fourth freedom flights, will the EU be considered as a whole, or will this be on the basis of individual countries? Yes. And then there is a specification of the question again by Michael. So, for example, will a Finnish operator flying from France to the UK be considered as a third or seventh freedom flight? And how would Switzerland fit in this? Same example with Finnish operator flying from Switzerland to the UK. So I'm not sure, did you get the question, David? Yeah. Okay.
Forgive me. So the answer to that is yes. We're treating it as one block. You have a permit that covers the EU 27, the EEA states, and Switzerland.
Okay. So straightforward questions, answer and question maybe. Yeah.
Exactly. More simple questions, please, David.
Yeah. But I see the Q&A is quite popular because as soon as I'm answering the questions, but there are more coming. So this is very good news. Another anonymous question. How long are the UK CAA currently taking to process block permit applications? Ours have been in for approximately 1 week, but we have not heard anything back as yet. So a very practical, almost administrative question.
Okay, so a very honest answer. Yes, you have made your application. We obviously are not, we need to discuss with our counterparts in Department for Transport when we start to issue these permits. I think in some ways that will be dependent upon the course of the next few days, and we'll see what the negotiations actually deliver. And the reason is predominantly logistical. So we will, I think the assurance you can have from us is the fact that we would issue it, deal or no deal, we will issue, if the qualifying criteria are met, in advance of 31st of December. I intend to have as quiet a Christmas as I possibly can. I intend to enjoy the new year. I think I and my team have deserved it after the last 18 months. That said, the reason that we haven't started to issue those block permits yet is predominantly because we're not quite certain what the face of those permits might look like. So with a deal, we would have one set of wording. Without a deal, we'd have another. So we need a little bit more clarity before we press the button on issuing. So if we've acknowledged it, then we've got your application. So don't fret, we have it.
That's the most important. If I'm correct, David, in the letter that you sent to all our operators, you mentioned the 4th of December is a kind of deadline to submit all block permit applications. And it meant, you said that in any case, those operators will get their permits to make sure they can operate as of 1st of January 2021. So that's the idea. And if I can remind also all the operators who didn't submit their application, yeah, indeed, to do it as soon as possible, so you can those permits, and you don't have to work until the 31st at 23:59, and you can enjoy a nice New Year party. I don't know with all the measures, the COVID measures, but at least you can celebrate with your family.
David, thank you for that. I mean, just to put that into context, yes, that it is not a deadline as such, in the fact that we are just saying that if you do not make your application by that point, we are not guaranteeing that we'll be able to process it. It doesn't mean to say that we won't actually receive it and consider it. So if you want to, if for whatever reason you're not in a position to send it at this stage, we appreciate that you may not be. Don't leave it too late. The longer you leave it, the less chance you have of actually having it granted.
Okay, the sooner the better anyway. Thank you, David. So the next question, again, anonymous question. What frightens me the most is that we have 18 working days left until this all happens, but operators are only now asking basic questions about how they will physically operate. I cannot hope for a deal more than I am, else UK operators are, with COVID, facing an impossible 2021.
Well,
actually, it's not really a question, it's more a comment. So
I think it's a comment. I think I share the concern. The fact that the questions are now coming out at this stage. I'm glad that they are coming out at this stage. 18 18 working days. I think my team will probably smile at that, because in our world we consider weekends to be working days at the moment. So yes, we'll see how that goes.
Okay, thank you, David. So you are looking forward to the 1st of January, actually, to have real weekend after.
I'm exceptionally looking forward to the 1st of January. But in many ways, David, the hard work then begins, doesn't it?
Thank you, David. So the next question about EASA licenses. So how about pilot EASA CAA licenses reciprocity?
Okay.
I don't know if you have information about those. Yeah.
I can very briefly. What I would suggest you do, and there is the link to it on the slides that I sent through, go to our microsite, which talks about how we're actually managing CAA licenses and pilot licenses in general. It's quite a long subject. It's not something that you can necessarily deal with quickly. So I'm not avoiding the question. I'm pointing you to where you might get a better answer than I can actually provide in the time we have available. So our microsite has quite a lot on it. And if you have any queries after that, please come to us. There is a process of actually asking us more specific questions.
Thank you, David. And indeed, it's also a reminder to all the participants. I hope, and I suppose people know the CA microsite about Brexit, but in case they don't, there are many different types of information about how to handle the practical details of the end of the transition period on this website. So I see that there is now a question for Eve. If Eve is still with us, I hope she's still with us. The UK has been a popular choice for importing aircraft into the EU. One reason is the effective VAT rate on aircraft was 0%. Has there been any certainty established on whether these imports will still be valid in a no-deal situation? Will operators have to re-import the aircraft to avoid any issues when operating in the EU? And then there is another comment to this question from Yasmina. I would like to extend the above question. What about AC imported into Isle of Man? If TA cannot be used, will full importation be required in both EU and UK? So if it's just, yeah.
I am still here. Happy to answer it. There's a couple of aspects to it, so I'll try and be quick because I know you've limited time. Yes, it's been a popular choice, but just to make the first point clear is the zero rating on VAT on aircraft is available in all European member states. It's part of the VAT regulation, so it's not just a UK or Isle of Man specific point. In terms of the historically imported aircraft which have been brought into the UK or the Isle of Man pre-Brexit, we have at BBGA been making huge efforts with all aspects of the Revenue Commissioners, the government, the DFT, Treasury, the Chancellor has even gotten involved. We've made the case very clearly for grandfathering of previously imported aircraft. And we have some very healthy assurances, including a letter from the Chancellor himself to BBGA confirming that they appreciate the problem and that every effort will be made to continue on and to effectively grandfather the imports. We have since, because we don't have anything, and while reassurances are obviously very gratifying, they're not law. So what we're doing now is working with a lot of the top tax advisors across the UK. We are basically joining together with them to work with government, and it has been a very healthy approach. It has the backing of a lot of, as I say, a lot of the top tax advisors. So we're going to continue with that. I think you can take it for not for granted, but take it that the UK will take a very measured approach in terms of either granting what's called return goods relief. So when an aircraft comes back into the UK, if you were previously imported, then you simply apply for return goods relief. And get in contact if you need any information on it. I'll happily share that with anybody. In terms of the Isle of Man question, same thing. Isle of Man is part of the UK VAT zone, so that the same rules apply. What we don't have clarity on, and what we are trying to get clarity on, is what will happen with the UK Isle of Man imported aircraft in Europe. Obviously, if there's a deal, there is a lot more stability in that sense. But it's a big question, and I can assure you we have been on this for 18 months now. They are well aware of the concerns we have and the potential exposure. So all I can say is it is very much an active thing. We at BBGA are doing everything we can to get that confirmation and clarity for you. And as soon as we have it, we will keep you updated, hopefully by the end of this week.
Okay, so you say if that you might have some more definitive answers by the end, at least of the transition period. The authorities are not waiting the 1st of January to inform about what's happening in this regard.
Well, that's the point. David, is unfortunately with aviation, and this is the point we've made in our submissions and lobbying, is we can't wait until the 31st of December. We need to know now what's going to happen, because the physical location of the aircraft is obviously going to be a key factor in terms of the applicability of VAT. I should warn that if your aircraft was previously imported, it probably needed to be imported. So you will need to be considering it. But I also should warn that there is not a one-size-fits-all. I have been increasingly more and more concerned about the fix-it solutions that are being bandied around the market. And in a lot of cases, when you analyse it, actually the aircraft that are being encouraged to move out and to literally move operation, move off the register, do everything, don't need to do any of that. They just need to readdress their tax position. So much is the same as I said earlier about everything to do with UK aviation and us going forward post-Brexit. It genuinely is. We need to keep calm. We need to be measured. You do need to take action. There's no doubt about it. But you need to take decisive action that's based on proper advice. You know, not a knee-jerk reaction. That's the last thing you should do. But as I say, contact us at BBGA. Contact me individually if you like. We're here to help. It's absolutely here to help.
Thank you very much, Eve. So yeah, I would also encourage everyone who, I mean, the operators who have those kind of very specific questions, maybe to get in touch also with you directly to have some possible answers based on the availability of the answers from the authorities on VAT issue. So thank you, Eve. And next question from Christophe Mittal. Do continental operators wishing to carry dangerous goods to or from the UK have to apply for UK approval for dangerous goods before doing it, or will at least at the beginning of an EASA approval for dangerous goods be sufficient?
So I think that's a really good question. And the reason being, yes, the EASA dangerous goods permission will be fine. That's what we're looking for. When we grant you a TCO, we will have actually taken into consideration, so your third country operator safety certificate. What we're actually doing is we are recognising, because we were part of the EASA framework, we probably understand it more than anyone anywhere else in the world that we might be called upon to review. We are taking on board all the operational specifications, the AOC, the operating licence, dangerous goods approvals, as part of that evaluation. So if you have an EASA dangerous goods approval, as long as you're in compliance with it, then that's fine. You need nothing more from us.
Thank you, David. I see that I still have 8 open questions in the thread, and we are almost running out of time because it's 11:58. So David, if you tell me you have maybe 5 or 10 more minutes for us, we'll try to be as quick as possible in answering those questions. And if not, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will get back to you separately. We will try anyway to compile all the questions with the answers, and the webinar is recorded, but we will try to address all the questions even if we don't have the time by the end of the webinar. So next question, how about pilot EASA CAA licenses? No, this was already answered. The next one, what are the opportunities after Brexit mentioned earlier?
I think there's an opportunity. There are opportunities for doing things differently. I'd like to believe that one of the things that UK Aviation in particular does is imaginative. It will find ways and means of actually coming up with new ideas of how to exploit the market, and hopefully we'll be in a position to actually support that in a way that we possibly, as a CA, which we possibly might not have been in the past. So not specific to this particular area, but I was at a seminar earlier this week when we were talking about how we might actually use drones in certain categories and where they might add value. And it's across the piece. I mean, there are so many things that we feel that we can actually do. I suspect that from all our perspectives, we've been concentrating on Brexit to such a degree that we haven't actually been able to stand back and actually see what opportunities there are more broadly. So there's a whole host, for example, of ways we might make some legislative change that hopefully will be more transparent and give a little bit more flexibility for UK operators in some of their undertakings going forward.
Thank you, David. So there's the prospect of being maybe more innovative, faster, more efficient. That's what you mean, actually.
I'd like to think that we were that already, but we have actually, and it's been in existence for about 2 years, a CAA Innovations Unit. They have a whole host of ideas as to what the future might actually look like, embracing new technology and all sorts of things. It's actually quite worrying how many things that they actually have on their list, considering that they will be coming to I and my colleagues asking for support in actually delivery.
Sounds good, David. Thank you. So next question, can you please provide a timeline for an update on reciprocal block permit arrangements, as we are about to start incurring significant costs if we continue putting arrangements in place with some EU countries? As an example, Germany are quoting up to 4,500 to issue an operator security approval. With the Christmas period coming up, we really need to know sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Okay, I think that one's quite specific, and one where you probably would need to come to us directly so that we can actually look at your specific case. In terms of how we're actually managing it, these are ongoing conversations. They're at different levels of discussion depending on the member state concerned. I can't give a timeline as to how long it may be or not for these structures to be in place unless they already have them. So, for example, Italy already has a block permit scheme equivalent.
Okay, so we understand that, as we discussed earlier, David, that you're not really in a position to give some specific details about where we are in the negotiation of this reciprocal agreements. But let's say that, are you positive that it's going in the right direction with most EU countries, or at least with the key markets?
I am warmly encouraged, let's put it that way. I'm not going to oversell this, because at the end of the day, it needs both sides to actually make movement. And it may be that eventually we can't do this. I think, however, that the benefits on either side are, I'd like to believe, apparent, and with goodwill on both sides, then we'll be able to achieve something that will be of value here.
Thank you, David. Next question, does an aircraft and helicopter maintenance agreement is also scheduled to happen, as many maintenance facilities are spread in between continental Europe and the UK?
I'm not certain I understand the question. If we're talking about, would there be a BASA in place between the UK and
or some sort of maybe reciprocity, recognition, okay. UK continental recognition, maybe.
Right, I can't, not by being evasive, I can't answer that question at the moment because that's still part of the negotiating discussions.
Okay, thank you, David. Next question, who can we contact in the upcoming weeks if we have any additional regulatory questions or doubts on certain topics? So this is an easy question, I suppose.
It all depends. In the first instance, go to your own regulatory authority. If you're coming to the UK and have queries, then come to us. And please, I mean, take the benefit of your trade associations, both the EBA and the BBGA. They add a lot of value here. Use them, because you'll probably find that somebody has already asked that question in advance.
Thank you, David. And anyway, if we don't have the answers, you know what's happening, we get in touch with you. So,
that's incredibly kind, but the offer's there. I mean,
so I see there are 2 questions left, so we might make it.
Okay.
A question from Andreas Braccia, operations manager at Universal Aviation in Italy. I understand that UK's operators will be third countries operators, and therefore the process to obtain the permit to operate commercially in Italy might take up to 45 days. Are UK operators ready, and are they already applying?
I'd like to believe that they are already applying. I think it's a matter for each operator themselves. We have put on our website, on our microsite, details of where you need to go for this type of information. I think it's, Andrea, you're quite right to highlight the fact that some countries have a sort of a dual stage approach. So, for example, Spain and Poland, forgive me, I don't know about Italy specifically, you have to go through an accreditation process. You only have to do it once before you can apply for a permit. It is slightly different structures depending on the state concerned.
Okay, thank you, David. So the message would be get in touch also with the, go on the website, the main website of the UK CAA, and indeed apply as soon as possible to get permits and to foreign authorities. And now the last question. Are you able to elaborate on any discussions that may be taking place regarding UK CAA recognizing EASA ATOs, the use of EASA Qualified FSTDs for UK FCL and UK AOCs?
Okay, again, I would encourage you to go to our microsite again. The reality is that there is a structure in place that whereby the UK CAA will continue to recognise EASA training organisations going forward. It is slightly complicated, and it is detailed on the website. But there is a process.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you very much. So I see it's 12:06, so we made it. We had enough questions. We answered 21 questions so far. So I think that you can be proud of you, David. It proved to be useful. Very quickly now, before we close this session, there will be another opportunity next week to ask questions again to British authorities, to the UK authorities. Our colleague from the Air Charter Association are organizing a Brexit roundtable session with the Department for Transport and the CAA. And David, you will be actually speaking again next week at this event. So I'm sure there will be, again, many other interesting questions. Before I close this webinar, I would like to thank all participants for the questions, for your participation, your active participation. You can still send additional questions to us by email. There is my email address, and I would be pleased to liaise with the CAA or to liaise with the BBGA to try to get answers to your questions. I would like also to remind you about the available sources of information that you can consult. There is a very good microsite of the UK CAA on Brexit. You can also find some information on our Brexit section on our website, including the letter that was sent recently by the UK CAA about the application to the block permit scheme. As Yves mentioned earlier, do not hesitate also to get in touch with the BBGA, with Yves directly if you have some questions. Be assured that we will be there to support you until the 31st of December, but we really hope that you will do everything that is necessary to get ready in case of no deal. And as I mentioned earlier to David and Yves, who knows? We are close to Christmas, and you know, sometimes there are some very good news happening during this period of the year. So maybe we can hope for a deal. Let's not count too much on that, but this is something that could happen until the last moment. So, well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, David and Yves. I don't know if you want to say a last word before we close.
I will. Thank you, David and Atta, for the opportunity of speaking today. I'm so sorry it was slightly disjointed due to the technology at this end. There is an open offer. If you have queries or worries, I like the phrase that you put out there, David, keep calm and carry on. That is exactly the type where we actually need to be. You're not in this alone, we're in this together. We will get through to the other side. I'd like to believe that it'll be a bit like Y2K and everyone will forget the fact that Brexit, call it what you might like, EU exit has actually occurred, and then we move on to a different playing field where we can remain friends and collaborate as we have strongly done in the past. Thank you once again, David.
Thank you very much, David. Eve, a last word before we close?
Sure, just to say once again, thanks again, David, and to EBAA for inviting us into this forum. Reiterate everything David is saying is we're here to help, and just to reassure everybody that we are well aware of the problems. We have been working very, very actively in the background for many, many months now, pushing into years. But that doesn't mean that we're aware of every little level problem. So please keep contacting BBGA. Please tell us your concerns. Interact with us, whether you're a member or not. Please do interact with us, and we will do everything we can possibly do to help. And as I say, in close collaboration with EBAA, the point here is exactly as David is saying: keep calm, carry on. We're just going to continue to work together and make sure we get through what we all hope will be a hiccup for the first few weeks of 2021. But the stability and the continuity is utmost importance to everybody.
Thank you very much, Eve. So on those wide words, keep calm and carry on. Thank you very much to all of you for your time, and get ready for Brexit. Thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.